The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Miles, and I want to welcome you to the second Friends in Recovery podcast from Studio 21, Salem, New Hampshire. And I want to thank Mr. Jonathan for our first venture last week and being back here again today. It's been very helpful.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. To my right is Ed Chionchio.
Hi, everybody.
And to Ed's right is Jeff Zeizel.
Hello.
The three of us are Friends in Recovery podcast. I also want to take this moment and thank Genesis House, which is in Palm Beach County, Florida, and very helpful recovery facility. You can reach Genesis House on their website, which is genesishouse.net, YouTube, iTunes, or Podbean.
That's how you find us.
The podcast.
Friends in Recovery, the podcast. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's how you'll find us. But also Genesis House, very, very helpful. They're sponsoring us, and just want to give them a shout out. All their staff has been very helpful as well. So, take it away, Ed.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to, thank Jonathan again and Studio 21 for supporting us, and I think we broke a little some barriers last week with everybody out there helping us kind of push this through, and have a lot of response and interest in recovery and maybe helping their loved ones in recovery. Thank you guys, I appreciate it, and thank both of you guys for doing this. I was looking forward to doing it again and kind of thinking about it and how we can help a bunch of people out there.
So Mike and I had talked about getting together, and we thought we lost Ed, but apparently Ed did such a fabulous job last week that he returned. He's like a bad penny, sometimes just shows up again.
Well, just to let you know, it took a village to get me up here today. 2 flat tires, a tow truck, delayed flights, everything to get up here to be to you guys. So.
And you're in recovery also,
and
so that's a good thing.
Yeah. And I practiced my serenity prayer all day long today, I can tell you that. So.
Certainly did. He texted me about 40 times, too. So today, we're going to have a David and Karen. David and his mother, Karen. David's in recovery. They're both from Columbus, Ohio. And I think it's a good opportunity for anybody that's struggling with an addiction problem, or a family member that has somebody that's struggling with an addiction problem. It's going to be very beneficial, I think, to hear from people that have been through the ringer and come out the other side and have a very successful life currently. So I'm going to introduce. They're on. So how are we doing this? They're on the phone.
They're on Skype.
They're on Skype.
Yeah, they're in the corner there.
You old people need to get with it with this technology.
Who are those people up there in the corner?
Mike is using the Telegram still.
Yeah. Teletype. Yeah. So, David, Karen, take it away.
How are you guys? Thank you so much for having us. You can hear us okay?
Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And, we're just going to go through on the basis of talking about families in recovery. We want to start off with sharing our story, and knowing what we went through. We're from Columbus, Ohio. I was born and raised here. My family had 2 good parents in the household, my mom and my dad. Been together 36 years, and I was raised in a good home. I had a good neighborhood. It wasn't like I was in a bad area or anything like that. And I saw early signs of addiction at an early stage, and I think my mother did too, of just how my tendencies were and everything like that. Whenever I loved something, I would go all in, and that was definitely a kicker of me starting. But really, my drug using stages started at age 12, and I was bullied a lot for my looks. My hair, my skin tone. I was really lanky. I was tall. I'm 6'5", and I was 6'5" in 8th grade. So I was this weird, awkward kid, and I wanted to fit in. So the 3 basic things of why I started using in the first place was A, peer pressure, B, I wanted to fit in, and then bullying. So that's really what stemmed the reason of why I started to use in the first place. And that's where I found my first love, which was, drugs. It was an escape for me. And I was a very good con artist to my family, and I had no idea about that because I didn't wake up one day saying, you know what, gosh, I can't wait to be an addict. That wasn't in the picture. I was a altar boy, Catholic boy, raised in a good home, and just stuff started spiraling out of control. It started off as a weekend thing with my friends, hanging out after a football game or a basketball game, and we didn't think anything of it. It was just like, okay, we're bored. Let's get high. So that's how it started, and it turns into an every other weekend. And then it turned into almost an every other day, and it progressed. My tolerance was building up and building up. But again, I didn't label myself as that addict. I just thought I could get off of it, and that's fine. So one day, I just didn't have the source of whatever drugs I was using at the time. And someone said, you know what, for the same price, I can get you cocaine. So that's how I dove into different drugs at the early stages of life. But really what down to it, the biggest thing real quickly is that I hurt my back playing volleyball. And that's when it really took a toll on me, because I went to my doctor and I got prescribed 8 different medications at one time. My mother was right there seeing all these medications coming through. And that's when my life took a turn for the worst, for sure.
David, one thing you did mention, and this is something we talked about last week, a good family. Addicts don't have to come from the poor part of town or the rich part of town or the other, but they can come from every part of town. A good, solid family. I mean, I know I mentioned last week that I had a rough upbringing. I really didn't have I wasn't in the bad area of Sayreville, New Jersey, where I grew up in. I don't think there is a bad area of Sayreville, New Jersey. But families, you come from a good family. I like that. I mean, your mom, I met your mom, and I met your whole family, David, and it doesn't seem like you would ever have a drug problem. I met you in recovery. I didn't meet you, when we were out there, and so good families can also get this disease that we have also.
And I just have a quick question, David. You said you progressed, and the progression of addiction is definitely one of the telltale signs, and definitely a condition. What was your drug of choice in the beginning at age 12? Was it marijuana or?
Marijuana, cocaine. It was just trying out different things. So that's really, alcohol was definitely in the picture there as well. At that young, that was really the only things that we could get our hands on. But then I started seeing a turn for the worst as soon as I got hurt and injured my back.
Mm-hmm. So, one of the interesting things is that the research tells us that the younger you are when you start using, the greater likelihood you will have a problem. So if you start using at age 12, which is actually quite young, statistically you'll have more of the sort of potential to develop a substance abuse disorder than when you pick up at 16 or 17. Mm-hmm. And we also know that most kids experiment. So it's not part of the developmental process of adolescence is to actually take some risk. The frontal lobes are still acting with impulsivity. So you end up doing sort of risky behavior. So you start experimenting. And in your case, David, what ends up happening is as many young people who develop addictive disorders, they get injured, and then the doctor becomes their supplier of substances.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
Absolutely. And Karen, I was just wondering, when did you first become aware of David's drug use? I mean, that it was other than just prescribed medication for pain.
Yeah, for me, it wasn't that early. I didn't know he started that young. I really didn't. So he was really good at concealing it. He was very good at disguising it, and that was one thing I think David's playing continuing that long. He was able to do it. It was in school. I would say probably in middle school, maybe high school. Started to see the signs because I know he was bullied. I know the kids would wait for him at the bus stop and they would jump him. And these were things that I had to keep an eye on him. And it was things where I knew what was going on, and I knew he was frustrated with the kids thing, and it was just a tough situation. So
what really happened is that, and in essence, my father has a background of addiction in his family. His father was an alcoholic. Brother died of using drugs as well. And so I stayed away from my father, and I manipulated my mom. So it was just me. Every addict has that one person that they go to kind of, be able to reach out. Mom, I have bills that need to be paid. Can I get a check for this? And then all of a sudden the next day I'm completely empty with money and stuff, at that rate. So I stayed away from my dad, and my mom was just so like, no, he's not that drug addict. Mark, which is my dad's name. So it came from an aspect of, I knew I could manipulate her, and a lot of addicts do that. Mm-hmm. So, and that really was a key factor. I think 9th, 10th grade is when you really started to see a turn because of the pills that I was getting. I mean, I was just having so much of muscle relaxers, pain relievers, you name it, I was having it. And because I was getting from a doctor, I'm thinking, okay, it's legal, so I can do this.
They gotta keep it.
Yeah, we as addicts, and David and Mike and Jeff, you know the kind of the clinical part of this. We know who to manipulate. We know who we can go to and manipulate that one person. My dad was a person that I could manipulate really easy. I was out of the house by the time I was 17, so really didn't. I did live my own world, but yet, David, we go right to that person we can manipulate and take money from. And, I knew where my dad had his stack of money from. And, it was very easy, as far as that goes. Where does Dad stand now as far as everything goes? Because I know sometimes when I talk to families, moms are in bored. They want to do everything. They want to help. But dads usually say, you know what? I'm done with you. I'm done. And just where does Dad stand now? Where Mark stand now?
Getting to that point, when I started really showcasing signs of addiction to them and I was manipulating my mother, my dad at that point in time was just like, look, either send him to jail or get him out of the house, because I moved out when I was 18 and everything like that. So, okay, I stayed away from my father. Now, my habit that was at one time turned into just like a one-time thing is now a $200 a day habit because of my opioid addiction. The doctor took me off of all my medication. He saw that I was getting addicted. So now my body is wanting, the release of the drugs. So I'm going on the streets now. My dad is saying to my mom, he just asked for $400. Why are you now forking out even more money? And she said, he's not, he's stressed out, this, that, and the third. I was manipulating. My dad was just like, that's it. I can't do it anymore. So I'm 210 pounds right now. I was 120 pounds when I was at the end of my stages. And one day my mom was like, look, we got to go to our family doctor. I stayed away from my family doctor because I knew he would know the signs. And during that time, 6-7 years ago, people were all about the opioid epidemic. Everyone's talking about heroin right now, but it really stemmed from the opioid epidemic and what Big Pharma has to do in this industry. And all my friends were using pills. We go to schools now and we talk to these 6th and 7th graders, and they are addicted to Adderall. I say, well, how do you guys study? We take Adderall. We share Adderall with our friends. So now they're already learning at a young age that if I have pain, if I have something that is wrong with my body, I can just be medicated and take care of it.
Karen, I was going to ask, when did you know that David wasn't being so truthful for you? Did pieces start falling together for you?
Yeah, I think it did. We started to see things, being stolen from the house, as far as videos and jewelry. Things like, well, I thought I put it here, but it's gone, and I thought I had more money in my wallet, kind of a thing. And what happened to this check? So
that's in the mail.
It was, So, but I was putting it off. I wasn't,
And I was that addict. I would sit there and say, like, my mom would be like, "Have you seen this jewelry?" I'd be like, "No, I'll help you find it," even though I just stole it and pawned it. So, like, that's the idea of what.
So looking back, Karen, do you have guilt? Do you feel like you were an enabler? Do you feel like you were blindsided? Or
yes,
I'm sure you've dealt with it now, but I'm just saying back.
Absolutely, yes. I feel like I was definitely the enabler. I feel like I was very naive at the time. I had no idea. Like Dave was saying, my husband, grew up in a home. His father was a former alcoholic, and his brother died of an overdose. So he grew up in it, and I had no clue. I didn't live around it at all, so I had no idea what it was about. I had, no idea. So it was all a new thing to me, and I was very supportive of my family, and I was in denial. Not my kid. He's just having a bad day, or he just needs a little extra cash, or hey, just help him out here. Yeah. So I would overlook things a lot.
Well, I think Jeff would agree with me, and I'm sure Ed too, but especially Jeff. Mothers usually are the ones that bring their children to therapy, to counseling, trying to find the answers, and they have so much guilt. They, because first of all, you're nurturing, especially in a teenage year. When young adults, mostly male, between the ages of 15, 17, they're getting their independence. Mothers are losing their ability, just in normal family. Not that you're not normal, but in families without addiction problems. But So mothers think they're losing their ability to nurture, and children, young adults are getting their their independence and their freedom. But I think there's so much. I hear it so many times when I sit with a mother and a son when they come in, and that's 90% of the people that come to me with a young adult with an addiction problem is usually the mother. Sometimes the father comes along, but usually it's the mother. Do you agree, Jeff?
I do. In fact, when I was young, my mother took me to a child psychologist. That kid never helped me at all. Actually, I think there's a special relationship between a mother and their children, and I think you don't want to believe what's in front of you, so it's easy to sort of dismiss it. Oh, he's just having a bad day. And I know David, and David's a beautiful person. And so it's easy to sort of go along with that. And then what, of course, happens is, you have mom saying, oh, I don't think he's that bad. What are you talking about? Then you have dad sort of disagreeing. And now you have like this triangulation. Right. So mom and dad are at conflict, and the child, the young adult, is often running with the substance abuse disorders. And now the issue is mom and dad aren't getting along. It's no longer about David's addiction.
Now it's the whole family disease kicks in at that point.
How do you counsel the mother to not feel guilty? Because it's, to me anyways, outside looking in, it doesn't look like it's her fault. This happened. This was a set of cards that she was dealt. So how do you counsel that mom to not feel those feelings of guilt?
Well, that's actually a great question. I would actually ask Karen, what helped you not feel guilty, Karen, after this was going on?
Well, I think going to NA meetings. I think once I started to understand the process, and going to Parkside, they had opportunities for us to learn about how we can help ourselves and understand about the addiction process of it. So it really helped me out a lot to understand it and to learn about it. And I did a lot more research, so it really opened up a whole new gateway to understanding that it wasn't me. It wasn't what we were doing. We weren't responsible. So I started to take that guilt off my shoulders and started turning it around, saying, this is why. No, this is how I can help myself, so that I can help him.
I was just going to add that. What really helps many families is knowing you're not alone. So people go to Al-Anon, or they go to a family programs where they realize, like, wait a second, that person who spoke, that's my story, and therefore you learn what has helped them, and then you get support from each other. Then you can actually set some limits and detach, and then say to yourself, I'm killing my son or daughter with kindness, so therefore I need to back off. And it's not about being angry; it's about setting clear boundaries. And we run in my office, we run a family support group on Tuesday nights for parents of opiate users. And one of the things that we always say is that, getting angry doesn't get you anywhere. Always tell your child you love them. You will always help them get treatment. You will help them get better, but you're not going to give them money to use. You're not going to enable them. You're going to set appropriate boundaries. If they need a ride to go to a meeting or a doctor's appointment or a therapist's appointment, so be it. Yeah. But you're not going to get manipulated.
Now, good. I'm sorry, Karen.
One thing I always see once you mentioned that was, I think it's really important for parents to know this. I will not enable you with your addiction. I will enable you in your recovery. That is the key, and that's something you really have to, focus on as a parent. I just can't do that
anymore.
Yes,
that's a great point. So we always say, let's facilitate recovery. Let's stop enabling.
Yeah. Now, Karen, did the Al-Anon and Al-Anon and family programs help you kind of get there and kind of lay those boundaries down? I know you said you attended family groups. Al-Anon and all that is huge out there. For years, it's been huge. I attended a few Al-Anon meetings myself. Did that help you? Is that a good avenue for a mom to stop this and keep your life going and let David do what he wanted to do?
Yes.
I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but
absolutely, and I agree with you. Absolutely, that was the one thing that helped me to feel like it wasn't me. I didn't feel that guilt. That I did something wrong, because that's what I kept putting in my mind. It must be something I did or I didn't do, or putting the blame on yourself as a parent. But when you start going to these meetings and you associate yourself with other people with similar situations, you start putting the pieces of the puzzle together, saying, this sounds familiar, and wow, okay, this is how you handle that. And this is what, you're given some direction on how to handle things. So it really puts things back into perspective. And so you can start, living, a wholesome life again, and you can start, being the person that you are, without being associated with I am responsible for.
I think it also helped my mom and dad's marriage too, because the addiction aspect was breaking the family apart.
So,
and then when my mom and dad started going to Al-Anon and NA meetings, they were together, coming back together, saying, okay, we need to make a team effort on this with David. So, that's really how I saw it from the outside perspective.
Yeah, and it really did help us as a family unit. And like Dave was saying, my husband and I, we had to put boundaries. We had to say, this is, you're in our household. We don't have to have you here. And if you want to live here, this is what, we require you to do. And it was just, set the limits.
And excuse me, and it's very important for people to know, especially parents that are separated, divorced, because what happens a lot of times is usually the addict's living with usually mom, and mom is divorced, and she gets a lot of flack. It's her fault. And also, the addict's living with mom, and that's his ally. And we don't want to upset dad because he went off last time we talked about this. So let's not tell him about the check you stole out of my register. Mm-hmm. Let's not tell him about the jewelry you pawned. And, it really, what you're speaking to is so important, because the family dynamics, addiction is just, I hear addicts say, I'm only hurting myself, and it's so untrue. And the family can be in such turmoil. And Jeff does have a great group on Tuesday nights, and I've actually sent people there, and people I know and love, and just people in general. But I think it's so important. Yeah. And the simplest, I just want to put this out, the simplest, most convenient, accessible help you can get is Al-Anon or what's the
Naranon?
Naranon, yeah, Naranon.
Family group.
Because it doesn't cost a dime. Yeah. You go in, you listen to other people's problems, and then there's another group. And I just want to speak to this real quick. It's the parents that have lost loved ones, young adults, to opioid overdose, and we have a group in Lowell. A couple women have started, and sadly because of their loss. And those are the meetings you don't want to go to. Those are the meetings you want to avoid. But again, once you've lost a child, I cannot imagine the guilt, the unnecessary guilt, the unwarranted guilt that some parents feel, because they're parents. These are a lot of young adults dying. They feel responsible. And agree?
So, absolutely. Circling back, Jeff, this might be a question for you, but it sounds like that Mom, Karen, your recovery started before David's recovery started. And I'm wondering if that's true in a lot of families, that the family's recovery starts first and then it pushes the addict into treatment.
Well, it is true. Once the family system learns that, number one, it's an illness, and it's not about blaming people. It's not about blaming the person with the substance abuse disorder. You don't blame someone who has cancer. You don't blame someone who has heart disease. So once you understand that it's an illness, then you can actually start doing the things that will facilitate recovery. And like what Karen had said, we're going to enable recovery. We're not going to enable the disorder. Yeah. But we also know that when the parents become united and people understand that it's an illness, they also can forgive themselves, because you can be the greatest parents in the world and have children who get the disorder. You could be, quite frankly, very ineffective, irresponsible parents, and you have children who become superstars. Mm-hmm. So we don't always know, but there is a correlation. Effective parenting has to do with communication and love and caring and so on, and setting healthy boundaries, good role modeling. One of the things that we do know is that families who have a dinner once a week with their children and parents, the likelihood of the children developing substance abuse disorders diminishes. So when I see families, I often ask, so do you folks eat dinner together? And remarkably, you find that many of them don't. Some kids watching TV, the dads elsewhere watching sports, etc. We also know.
There?
Yeah, we're here.
So we often see that, but I think, David, when your parents got together and started realizing, like, hey, we got a problem here, all of a sudden, I think things probably changed a bit, and maybe that helped facilitate your recovery.
Yeah. And when I got into recovery, I noticed that that the family did have to change. Well, they didn't have to change. And in my case, I noticed part of my family changed and part of my family didn't. And I kind of gravitated away from the people who didn't change and gravitated towards those who changed. I didn't have a supportive family as David. I shouldn't say that. I really did have a supportive family. But it wasn't as kind of
Well, you're from New Jersey.
Yeah,
give me
from
something.
Jersey.
Right.
So yeah, but you know,
tough state.
It was
Very tough.
It's good to have that one member that can be there for you, but won't take your crap if you kind of want to manipulate them. Now, Karen, did that happen to you as far as your recovery start first before David's? To circle back to the beginning.
Yeah, it did. I think, you know, the fact that once we realized David was in full-blown addiction and he needed help, then we started researching and finding resources, you know, through the doctor, through, the recovery center, and just through people that we spoke to. I wish we had known about earlier. That's one thing I wish we had, you know, tapped into and maybe started, you know, researching it earlier. However, you know, timing is everything, and it isn't, you know.
Well, you know, one of the things I was just going to comment, you know, one of the things we mentioned last week is that addiction is a disease of denial. So it's not just for the identified patient, as we would say, it's also for the family.
Yeah.
Well, David, how old were you when you started your recovery? How many years ago?
So I'm going on 7 years. So I was 21, turning 22.
Well, it's a young age.
Yeah. And I mean, for someone to say that you can't, you know, you got to be sober for, you know, at age 21, you know, I was actually legal to do things like, you know, as far as that goes. But it was a different change for me. When I went into treatment, I fought it. I didn't want to go. That was a definite. But my dad and my mom, and we were all out of options. You know, I was living in a townhome. I was a manager at McDonald's. I thought that I knew the world and that they didn't know anything. And I'm like, okay, look, I'm going to do this for them. And that was my whole aspect of just kind of starting over. But I'll tell you what, an addict's worst fear is withdrawal. So that's the reason why people are going to go out and continue to use, because they don't want to feel sick whatsoever. And once I started seeing friends of mine dying, and they were getting closer and closer to actually our house, it was at that point where I was like, okay, I think I need to get help. And it was to, like, you know, having a $200 a day habit was not something that I thought was, okay, how did I get to this point? How did that happen? My family was out, like, my mom just had enough. My dad had enough. And so I hit rock bottom. And when I went in to treatment, it completely changed my life. I was learning a program. I decided, like, look, if I'm going to go into recovery, then I'm going to be all in. And what happened is because me and my dad were not close, my mom was the person that enabled. So that's why when I first went to recover or into treatment, I was fighting it. So my dad shows up one day for family visitations, and I thought my mom would be there. Again, I would just use her as the manipulation. And he comes alone. He's like, your mom's not coming today.
Surprise.
Welcome to reality.
That plan went out the window.
And how did that go?
How'd that work out?
I was like, great. So my dad's here. We don't get along. We haven't gotten along since I was 12, pretty much. And he's sitting there. We're looking at each other, and he's like, Dave, I'm going to tell you this. I lost my dad to this, and I lost my brother to this. And I can't lose a son to this. And your mom's not going to be here today. He's like, I'm going to be here, and I'm going to tell you. And he stuck his hand on my chest. He pointed on my chest. He's like, you got to have to do this for yourself. You got to want to do this. He's like, and I could see the emotion coming out. Hardly would see him cry. And then that time I was just like, all right, Pops, you know, like, I'm all in. Like, you know, I'm all into recovery. I'll do this. It just completely changed. It was the right time, the right person, and it clicked. And from that point on, I was all in.
Great scenario. And I think a lot of people go into recovery for the family. They go in because they've hit a jackpot, so to speak. They got arrested. They ran out of money. They got caught stealing. They got a court case. They go in for all the wrong reasons. They get into treatment. This is why treatment centers don't have a great success rate, no matter how good they are. But I think it's important that when the addict is all in, or at least halfway in, willing to go, you know, the old saying, bring the body, the mind will follow. And just real quick on the recovery part, the fear of, you know, quitting drinking, quitting doing other drugs, it's very difficult. But you're right, the opioid addiction is a different addiction, and I think it's a physical, emotional, psychological, you know. The good news is there are medications out there that will help you. There is Vivitrol. There is Suboxone. Naltrexone. Yeah. These are medication. These are drugs that will assist you to a point where you might not even realize that, you know, you could be sick. That's how well they do work. It's just trying to seek them out and find the right doctor and such.
I was going to just say
it's real quick, Jeff. I want to give the 800 number for everybody. The 800 number to get hold of Mike or any of us on the show is 800-989-6504. That's that'll ring directly to Mike, and that'll get you kind of connected to whatever you want. So that's 800-989-6504. We haven't given that number out yet. I just want to go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you. That's an important number. So, David, one of the interesting things is that you started your recovery at age 21, which is when young people start actually experimenting or using legally, as you had pointed out. So based upon the research from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, they say that the average opiate user who's using drugs, it takes them 9 to 10 years before they get off of it, and multiple inpatient treatment facilities. So what's truly amazing is that at age 21, you achieve something that most people don't achieve for a decade. So, which is quite fantastic. And Mike made a point that said, some people go to treatment for another reason. I'm in trouble with the court. They still want to use. They have the love affair with the drug. They're not ready to part ways. But somewhere along the line, sometimes for certain people, things change. For you, it was the interaction with your dad, who clearly, as you were telling the story, I'm feeling like the emotion myself. A remarkable intervention. And what we do know is that people go inpatient. Maybe on day one, they're not so enthusiastic. Sometimes around 2 or 3 weeks, things often will change for people. And then, they embrace it. So you became all in. And here we are, 7 years later, doing great.
Yeah. I have a quick question, David. I'm just wondering, were you ever, without getting too specific, were you ever in trouble with the law? Did you have to go on probation? Were you required to take your analysis weekly or monthly or bi-weekly? Did any of that ever happen to you?
That was another thing. I was one of the lucky ones where I was not caught up with the law. I knew it was catching up to me. I will say that. It was looking at me right in the face. So I knew that something had to click. So, fortunately, I was not involved with, any law, enforcement or actually getting, arrested or anything like that. So that was my difference in that scenario. But
I was going to ask Dave, did you have any overdue library books? No? Good.
But I just want to speak on that really quick because it's so important to know that as therapists, we can sit with an addict for an hour. We can sit with the parents, the family, do a group. And if they're not all in, obviously, you're talking. They're listening. They're not paying attention. The mind's somewhere else, and we understand that. However, I'm sorry. You go ahead, David. Go ahead.
I was going to say that the main, I feel a big reason why people keep relapsing is that they go right back in their environment. See, for me and my family, when we got out of treatment, I put together a family contract that basically said, okay, if I'm living under your roof, you're going to see all my transactions. I'm not going to have any cash on me. You're going to be linked to my bank accounts. You're going to take the mileages on the car. You're going to see everything. And if I slip up at all, then I know that I'm kicked out. So it was just like we put together I got a flip phone right as I got out of treatment.
I still have one, David. It's not that funny.
Mike doesn't even know how to text.
I deleted Facebook. I deleted Instagram. I deleted all the contacts and everything because Facebook is so important. If people are in treatment, the family should go in and delete Facebook. It takes 30 days for Facebook to delete anyways, and a lot of connections are through Facebook. So that's a big thing of, okay, now I have to get out of my environment, so I'm not around the people, places, and things, and I can get a core group of people, my brothers, whatever, to back me up and keep me accountable. And that's how I feel like a good success rate happens, is getting the person out of their environment.
And I couldn't agree more. And my point of this was, this disease is so cunning, so baffling, so insidious, so powerful that you could be sober 4, 5, 6 months, and things could be going wonderfully. And then all of a sudden the urge comes, and you have no consequences. You think you might owe it to yourself to go out and, tie one on, get some pills, whatever. But when you're on probation, when you have to go see a probation officer once a week, you have to give your analysis, whenever they want you to, you have consequences. And I find a lot of people will go along for a short time and then they just can't do it. They fall out. They end up getting arrested. They end up being incarcerated. And that I worked in law enforcement for a long time, 35 years as a cop, 14 months as a correctional officer. I work with the courts now with my private practice, as Jeff does. But the courts now, they're like therapists, these probation officers. They understand addiction. They understand that you're doing the things you're doing not so much because you're a bad character or a criminal, although you're committing criminal acts. You're an addict, and you're trying to keep it going. So I'm not saying they go easier on you, but I think they understand it more than they did, say, 10 years ago. Do you agree?
It's so true. I mean, what we find now, fortunately, is that the judicial system is looking at this as an illness. So do we lock people up for being sick? It's not helpful, and they don't really get better. Some people actually will get clean and incarcerated. However, what we're looking at is alternative sentencing now. Mm-hmm. So instead of sending someone to lock up, they'll send them to treatment. They'll get better. They have to follow their treatment plan. Just as you had the family contract, David, which was like, here are the rules of the house. You divert some money. You do something you're not supposed to do. There's a consequence. So we all have to be accountable, and people who are more accountable in life usually achieve more success.
Yeah. The one thing, David, and it sounds like you were kind of one of the shining stars in recovery, and kind of got it and just kind of ran with it. I know for me, I went into recovery for my family for the first year, and then I got a wake up call, and I said I got to do this for myself, and I kind of just said, okay, I'm going to put my family aside. I'm going to work on me. Now, we all know if you put anything in front of your recovery, it's probably going to go away. You know what I mean? Family, money, whatever it is, that's going to go away. You got to take care of yourself first. I realized about a year into my recovery. I'm just wondering, did you get that like right at the beginning, or were you in there for mom and to please her and keep that contract, so you don't have to, live in the streets, and that's, I know I'm not unique, but I don't know if that happened to you or not.
The most beautiful thing, I want to say this first off, I didn't get sober to live a boring life. I got sober to enjoy life and to actually base life on that. So that's the reason why I like to talk to a lot of, when I go to rehabs and I'm talking to people and the group sessions and stuff, I tell them that. I say, look, we want to ultimately live a good life. We want to have a great life with our families. We want to, enjoy it. And what happened with me in rehab, after I got out, the first 3 months, I'm burying 30 friends. So I'm wearing a suit. I'm going into funerals left and right. She's coming with me. And she's seeing this happen, and I'm going, what is going on? That my town was being shooken up from this opioid epidemic. That, like, for me, it drove me to want to really help. I could have chose a different career path or whatever. I just wanted to help, recovering addicts and their families, because we personally were touched by it. So I think that's what's, really kept me on, straight and narrow of, like, not only going with the family contract, but I'm seeing miracles happen in front of me. I love the first stages of recovery because that's when you start having dreams again. You can start living again. You're seeing your body change. You're seeing these wonderful steps taken into place that, your higher power is going to bless you with after you do take that initial step. But for me, it was when I started seeing all these funerals, I'm going back and forth to these funerals. I knew we had to do something, and that's how Loud Life was started.
What a refreshing power of example. You certainly
are. Are we frozen?
I really believe that listening to David, he talked about the recovery steps and such.
Uh-oh.
I feel.
Oh, they're there.
I just
keep going.
I just have a real quick question as well. When you talk about steps, are you talking about just personal steps, or are you into recovery where you adhere to the 12 steps of recovery? I'm not sure David can hear us.
I think we might have lost him.
Okay,
we might have lost him.
And again, the 12 steps of recovery are so important. You can find them. You can Google them. In early recovery, steps 1, 2, and 3 are so important. There are other steps too, but you progress as you go. But I listening to David, you can tell the gratitude he has, the attitude of gratitude, the gift of sobriety, which it is a gift that can be taken away any time. I just think it's very important, and you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Jeff does as well. It's good having Jeff. Jeff's not recovering, nor does he need to be, but Jeff certainly understands the recovery process, and I think the 12 steps of recovery. The old timers in AA, back in the day when I started going, there was still a lot of old timers. They made it look so simple. Yeah. They really did. But one thing they never varied from it was the literature. The big book, the 12 Steps to Recovery, and the 12 Traditions. Which
Mike, now we're the old timers in AA.
Yeah, you're the old timer.
We're those dinosaurs.
I'm the old timer in anything.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to give the number out again: 800. 800-989-6504, and that's to get a hold of any information that you have or any questions you have. It's 800-989-6504. We'd like to thank David and his mom, Karen, for being guests today on Friends in Recovery, our podcast. And
we do have them back on the line.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, let's just
Welcome back.
wrap it up and say thank you to them. And
thanks for having us, guys.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you.
see you next week.
Yep.
Good job.
Any last words, Mike?
Well, I just want to say I really want to thank David and Karen. I think it's awesome to have a son and his mother on, and especially someone who's been successful at such a young age. And it really is difficult at 21 to say, well, this is it. A day at a time, I'm going to try to stay away from alcohol and drugs. And it seems like his life's going pretty smooth.
Absolutely.
Before we close, Dave, can you just talk about your foundation that you started?
Yeah. Well, Loud Life is Loud stands for Live Out Your Dreams. Life is living in freedom every day. Our mission is to inspire and empower those affected by addiction. We've helped over 400 people get in sustained recovery, and we talk at schools, businesses, churches, wherever, about our story, about our mission is to say that we do recover. That's the main thing, is that we want to show people that there is hope, and we're just giving out resources that we know to help individuals get clean.
And it's a website. I'm sorry.
What's your website?
Loudlife.org. LOUDLIFE.org.
Great. One last thing from me. I just want to tell the families there are help out there. David and Karen are a success story. It can happen. So you folks, mom and dad, or mom, if you're watching this, there is help out there. This is a success story. There are meetings out there for people who lost loved ones. You don't want to go to those meetings. Make that choice now to get your loved one some help, and by calling that number 800-989-6504, or reaching out to anybody that you can. Again, I'm big on the family component with everything, and once the family gets involved, that's when we're found out. That's when us addicts have to start kind of manipulating different ways, and it gets too much, and we kind of get our backs pushed against the wall. And David and Karen, like I said, are a huge success story. And thanks for coming on, guys. Jeff?
For having me.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure.
So it's a pleasure to be with all of you, and it's always good to have people who show how it's done.
Yep, and thank you to Genesis House and Studio 21 and Mr. Jonathan.
And remember, you can get us through the Genesis House website, genesishouse.net. You can watch this podcast also on iTunes and YouTube.
And we'll see you next Tuesday afternoon, 4 o'clock. Friends of Recovery, Studio 21. Thank you.
Next week, we have Kevin Dixon on from KD Consultants and Interventions. Thanks, guys.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.